Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to go through the process of creating a couple of custom shaders to apply onto this model, just to give it a little bit of a stylized look. So obviously we've got a donut here. This has been created primarily in ZBrush, so it's got a lot of slightly finer model detail than you'd normally get from say a model that's been created directly in Maya. And if I select it, you can actually see how dense the geometry is there. This has had a polygon reduction process run over it called Decimation Master, which is a ZBrush plugin, and what that allows the software to do is reduce the number of polygons you have on your model, but while it reduces them, it tries to maintain the actual surface detail, so all these little bumps and so on, so that it can be imported into software like Maya, for example. Trying to import the object directly into Maya without doing that reduction in polygons will basically crash Maya, because it's not designed to take as many polygons as ZBrush is. So the actual structure is a little bit messy, but that's really just you know, not gonna be an issue for this demonstration. So basically what I'm going to do is just create a couple of little shaders that we can put on here just to give this a bit of color. This is really rudimentary, very base level material application. So we're not going to go into anything particularly fancy, and I'm not trying to make this look realistic. It's just you know, a bit of an exploration of the way that we can adjust some of the material settings. Okay, so what I'm going to do first of all is open up the Hypershade panel. Now we've got a couple of different ways we can do that. We can use the Hypershade perspective preset down here, or we can open up the Hypershade as a separate floating window, and we can do that from Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade, just here. That'll open up the Hypershade panel. I tend not to use this floating window unless I've got a lot of other panels that I'm going to be using a lot, in which case I'd place this on my second monitor. When I'm using a single monitor, which is what I'm doing at the moment, what I would do is use the preset down here, and that'll basically open it up as a secondary viewport. Okay. So the Hypershade basically set up as 4 different main areas. We've got the creation panel over here, and this allows us to select different types of materials from the list. We've got our sort of node storage area up here, so we can see any material shaders that we've got, any textures that we've imported into Maya as images, for example, and potentially any procedural textures such as let's have a quick look. Where are they all? For example, this mountain shader, or a fractal, a mountain texture, grid texture, checker, bulge. These kind of things will end up in here as well, so that we can just access them if we need to use them. Utilities, we'll actually have a utility node in here, and that can be found under the utilities node. We will be using a SamplerInfo node. So these are just kind of nodes that allow you to adjust the effect of textures or colors or things like that within your shaders. A lot of them are based on mathematical principles and so on. You know, you've got multiply, divide, that kind of thing. And you know, we've got a few other areas up here, lights, cameras, and so on. So this panel can be used for more than just creating materials. It can actually be used to connect different, for example, on your cameras, you can actually connect different lens type nodes for our rendering system, Mental Ray. Okay, so there's lots of different things you can do. We're going to use this for adjusting some materials. We've got the work area down here, and this is where we can actually connect different nodes, such as this Lambert, to other nodes to change the effect that the material has on the object. Down the bottom, we've got a node editor. This was added, I think, in my 2014, maybe 2013. This is very similar to the work area here. They work in almost the exact same way. You'll notice that they've got a lot of the same options. For example, we've got graph input connections, input and output connections, and output connections. And we've got the exact same thing up here. So these three buttons will basically load selected nodes from the tabs at the top here into the work area. If we've got selected nodes up here and we press this button, or these buttons down here, it'll load them into this editor. So there's almost the same usage from these two different panels. I'm not going to use the node editor at the moment. I'm going to use the work area, although I do kind of prefer the node editor personally. But I'm just going to use the work area. That way we can reduce the amount of panels we've got open. So I'm just going to grab this little divider here and just drag the node editor down until it disappears. You can always click and drag that again to bring it back if you want. And a lot of what we're going to, pretty much everything we're doing in this, we can actually do in the node editor as well as the work area. But it just helps to make a bigger window here to work in. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is create a couple of different colored materials. I'm going to have one for the icing on top of the donut just here, and then I'll have one for the dough section of the donut at the bottom here. So I'm going to start off with the icing on the top. What we want to do is kind of look at the surface properties of icing. If you want to achieve a sort of more realistic look, then you would want to have something that's slightly shiny. Because obviously the icing on a donut tends to be slightly shiny or glossy. I'm going to, for this, use from the Maya list. I'm going to use a blend for this. So I just click on blend, and you'll notice it loads the blend into our material tab here in the upper section, and it also will add it to the work area so that we can start to adjust things. So what we want to do is double click this, and that'll open up the attributes for it. And the first thing I'm going to do is rename this blend, and I'm going to call this icing shader. Just hit enter to make sure that that locks in. My habit generally is to put the word shader at the end in capitals, just so it's going to stand out a bit more. If we're trying to, maybe view the scene in various lists and so on. So I know that that's definitely a material shader. So then basically what we're going to do is, what I want is to create a sort of a varied color on the icing. I don't want it to just be a flat color. Now we could do a flat color just by, adjusting the color that we want over here. So, for example, if we want to do sort of like a classic Homer Simpson kind of pink donut, then we can kind of pull this sort of into that color. What I want to do is actually have a varying color based on the angle of the camera to the surface. So that's going to require two more nodes. We need a ramp node, and we also need a SamplerInfo node from the utility list. The ramp node is actually in here, and I'm going to select that first. So what I need to do is kind of scroll down, and I need to look for a ramp node. Now it's not ramp shader, that's a different node altogether. Okay, so if I scroll down, I can see it here, ramp. Now you can quickly get to it by typing in, if you know the name of the node that you're after, you can actually start typing it in here. So if I type in RAM, you can see now it reduces that. So what I'm after is this ramp node, so I'm going to click on that as well. Now in some versions of the software, older versions, you would middle mouse click and drag this into here. I'm finding with the more recent versions, if you click it, it'll add it in. Now, it'll also appear in textures, because a ramp node is a texture node. So that'll appear up here. So if you ever need to access it again and it's not here, you can actually get to it from here. Now you'll notice that it's currently selected as well, and the attributes therefore have switched to the ramp. So what I'm going to do is rename this icing ramp, and I'm just going to remove the number from the end. Just hit enter to lock that in. Okay, now you'll notice that there's another node that's attached. Okay, we can just select these like an object and move them around by dragging them. You'll notice that it's connected. Okay, now this place 2D texture node is essentially the node which dictates how this colored ramp is positioned on the object once it's applied. All right, so don't worry about this. Leave it in here, but we don't really need to play around with this. Okay, so now I've got my ramp and I've got my blin. What I want to do is on the ramp, let's just select that. What I want to do is in the settings, I need to change the color of the ramp. So I'm going to change the color to this pink color, because that's what I want one of the base colors to be. So what I can do here is select this little circular tab just here. Okay, and then what we can do is load this pink color into here. So we can just click on the color swatch and you'll notice that it's in the recently used color strip just here. So I can select that. Okay, so at the other end we've got this default black. What I want to do is create a slight fall off or a slight color gradient using this color as the base. So what I would want is a slightly darker version of this. So if we go into this little tag here, select the same pink color, but then use the we can use the little picker here, just move this up and make it a bit darker, like this. You can see now we get this slight gradient, but it's still within that kind of purpley pink spectrum. Okay. The other thing that I want to do here is change the type to U ramp, just there. And you can see what that does is it rotates this 90 degrees, the actual color gradient, like that. And I want to change the interpolation to smooth. All right. It's not going to change much, but I tend to kind of just smooth that out rather than leaving it as a linear type gradient. All right, so the next thing I want to do is add in a SamplerInfo node. Now what this is going to do is it's going to control what part of the color ramp is visible on which part of the object, based on the angle of the object to the camera that we're looking through. So what it'll do basically is have sort of a light pink coloring where the polygons are facing the camera, and where the polygons are facing away from the camera off to the side, it'll be darker around here. So we get this kind of gradient effect running across the surface. Now you don't have to go light to dark, you can go dark to light. You know, you could make this rather than a purple color, you could make it a whiter color. That's perfectly fine. You can experiment with that. I'll just show you how to connect it up. So what we're going to do over here in the list, the Create tab, is select Utilities. We can remove this, and in fact what I'm going to do is just type in SA, and that'll give me my SamplerInfo node. So what we'll do is click on that, and that's going to add in just there. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is connect the info node to the ramp. Now keep in mind that we've set the ramp to U type just here. That's going to be important in a second. All right, we don't need to change anything on the info node settings. What we're going to do is take the sampler info node, we're going to middle mouse click and drag, and we get this little icon for our cursor, and we're going to drop it onto the ramp, and it'll give us this little menu. What we want to do is come down to Other, just here, and it's going to pop up this connection editor. So the outputs here are for the sampler info node, which is this one. Okay, so that's all the settings or all the connections for that node. Over here on the right hand side, we've got the icing ramp, which is this one. And that's all the connections that we can potentially connect to. So what I want to do is use the facing ratio option just here on the sampler info node. So that's basically going to be the setting which dictates or indicates that we're interested in using the direction that the camera is facing and the orientation of any polygons to the camera in whatever we're going to connect it to. It's a bit complicated, but you'll see the result in a minute. So with facing ratio selected, we then want to indicate that we want to use UV coordinates over here, and if you expand that down, you'll see U coordinate. Now what this is going to do is match the direction type that we set for our ramp. So our ramp was set to U ramp, so we're going to use U coordinate just here, and we'll select that. You can see when you select both, you get a little connection line over here. When you've got those two highlighted, you can just press close like that. So now what we've got is our ramp node connected to our sampler info node, and now what we need to do is connect the ramp node into the color channel of our shader. So what we can do is select the shader like that. There's a couple of different ways we can do this. This is probably the easiest way of visually seeing what's going on. So if we select our shader just here, the icing shader, that'll bring the attributes up, and I can see the color channel just there. And what I want to do is connect that icing ramp to this color setting. So what we can do here is use the middle mouse button, click and drag on the ramp, drag it over and drop it onto color. Now when you see this little dotted outline here, you can let go of the mouse button and that'll connect it in. Okay. Now you'll notice that the thumbnail has now changed and it's displaying the results of this ramp and the sampler info node that's driving the color change. So you'll notice on your shader, you'll probably have a light pink middle, and then around the edge of the ball, it'll be darker, it'll be the darker purple. Now just to kind of exaggerate this a little bit, I'm just going to maximize this in the viewport, just so we can see it a little bit more. I'll just bring this over a little closer. Okay. So I've got my ramp settings. What I'm going to do is adjust this just so you can actually see the effect. All right. And I'm going to create a completely contrasting color. So you can see there what we're getting is the pink in the middle, which is this end of the ramp. So when a polygon is facing towards the camera, it has whatever color is over this side. And when a polygon is facing away from the camera at 90 degrees, you get this end of the ramp coloring it. And anywhere in between as the angle of the polygons change, they will take on the value anywhere in the middle of the ramp. Okay, so what we can do is use that to kind of adjust how the actual material looks. So you know, so we can have it start off bright and then go to a darker color, or what you could do is actually increase the brightness beyond what the original color was and have it sort of lighter around the outside. So if I dial up the brightness value, in fact what we can do here is grab this little drop down and set it to HSV, so that gives us hue, saturation and value, and you can see here that the saturation basically will push it into a lighter color like that, and you can see now we go from a pink color down to an almost white, sort of almost white kind of rosy color. Now what we can do as well is we can drop in additional keys, okay, by just clicking in the middle of the color swatch, and then we can adjust. Now pushing two keys together will give you a much sharper line between them, especially if the colors contrast a bit more. You can remove these little kind of key tab things by clicking on the box at the bottom, and that deletes them. And you can even move the end ones back and forward. So you can see when you take, say, this one and push them together, what we get is a more defined edge on that ring. So for example, what we might want to do is kind of push the pink a bit more, so we get a much smaller region that is colored by this end of the ramp. And you know, we can maybe push that in a bit like that. Another thing you could do is bring this in, drop another key or color key down the end here, and then apply this color to this one. So we could go back into there and grab that color, and you can see now you get a little darker area around the back, and this becomes more of a middle type of color like that. So there's lots of different things you can do with this, and really what you want to do is kind of adjust it to suit, you know, how you want your object to look as far as the materials are concerned. Oops. So I might have something along those lines. So you can see here, this is a little render from the kids show Rob the Robot, and you can see that they've used a similar kind of effect on these characters, where they've got these sort of gradients running out to a slightly lighter version of the main color. Quite often you can see here on this yellow, it works well if you have quite a deep color running out to white. So, you know, for this one, rather than having this sort of paler pink color, probably what we could do is push this more into a darker color, and that's going to kind of bring the effect out a little bit more, like that. You could even push this into almost a pure white kind of adjustment, you know. So you can adjust it to suit how you want it to look, and then what we can do is apply this onto the object. So I'm going to go with something about there, like that. So it makes it kind of almost a velvety looking finish sometimes. Okay, so what we need to do now is apply this shader onto this object. So we can just grab the icing shader, middle mouse drag it onto that part of the object. Now you'll notice that we don't get any kind of color change over here at the moment. If we select the textured view just here, it'll then show up, and you can actually see that gradient appearing in the viewport. I've got my renderer for the viewport set to viewport 2.0, which is the default in this version of the software. Okay, if you've got it set to legacy default, you'll just get a white color, because this version of the viewport renderer isn't able to read ramps properly. So depending on, you know, whether you're on a PC or a Mac, and whether or not your graphics card is able to kind of reasonably display the viewport 2.0, you can always kind of set it up like that. Okay, so I'm going to use the same process to create a material shader for the dough at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is clear out the work area. So we can do that by pressing this little eraser button here, clear graph. And I'm now going to come back up to the Maya list. I'll delete the little search that I had there, and this time I'm going to use a Lambert. And a Lambert's going to give me a matte finish. We've currently got a Lambert on there, but that's the default Lambert, which is Lambert 1, and that won't, we really shouldn't use Lambert 1 for anything, because many of the connections are actually locked. So on my new Lambert, I'm going to call this dough, oops, shader. Note that if you just put a space in, it'll automatically add an underscore. All right, same process as before. So I'm going to want a ramp node. So a ramp. So this is going to be dough ramp. All right. And I'm also going to want another info sampler node. I'm not necessarily going to use the same one from up here, this sampler info node. I'll use a new one. So I'll just go down to utilities, and this is alphabetical as well, so I know that it's just going to be here, sampler info. So I'll add a new one of those. What I will do is define this one by just putting in the word dough, so that I know it's the one that's driving that particular dough ramp. You can always go back into the utilities up here and rename the other one as well. Just call that icing. Like that. Okay. And you can see there when you hover over this now, it actually gives you a tooltip which tells you what the name is. Okay, same process as before. So I'm going to take my ramp, I'm going to set the type to U ramp. I'm going to select a color for my dough. And, you know, once again, if I go sort of like a bit of a Homer Simpson type color, I'm finding that, yeah, when this little indicator here is set down to white, it doesn't seem to like having the color changed, which is sort of weird. I've not come across it doing that before, so that might be a bit of a bug. So I'm going to go with kind of like a doughy color, kind of a browny orangish color. Something like that. And then over this side, I'm going to keep the same type of consistency I did with the icing, and I'm going to have a lighter version of this. So over here, I'm going to select that one, grab the original, and then I'm just going to pull this straight across so that it's like that. We'll grab the sampler info node, middle mouse drag it onto the ramp and select other, select facing ratio, and then expand the UV coordinate and select U coordinate so it matches the U ramp type over here. And then we'll close that panel. Then we'll select our shader and we'll middle mouse drag the dough ramp onto the color in the dough shader to add that in. And then we can middle mouse drag the shader onto the object to apply it, like that. So that's our finished material. So, you know, once again, you can go into the ramp and, you know, you can kind of play around with the positionings and so on. This one seems to be a little bit more subtle, so it's not showing up as much. So you can always go in and, you know, kind of adjust that. You know, we can kind of push that out a bit more to reduce the area that the blending takes place on. So we end up with something like that. So it just makes it look a little bit more interesting than applying flat colors onto your object. So there's a little overview of how you can kind of connect different nodes together in the Hypershade, and also it gives you a little bit of an idea of what the SamplerInfo node can do. So I'm going to leave this here, and I'll see you next time.